All right, good morning. I'm Aaron Heiser, Maker's Leather Supply, and today we are going to make a tote bag out of canvas and leather. Real easy project. Granted, it's a lot easier if you have a sewing machine. I'm not going to lie, but you don't have to have one. A lot of straight line stitching and stuff on this bag, so it's really not that difficult to make without a sewing machine. It just takes time. We've talked about that on some of the other videos. There's a difference between something that just takes a long time versus something that's hard to do. This one just takes some time. So what we have here is this bag is made out of just really, really heavy canvas. That way it's rigid and stays up on its own. And then really nice oil tan pull-up leather that we have that we call rough and tough. This leather, when I say pull-up, I mean it is ridiculous the amount of pull-up it has. It is some awesome, awesome leather. Um, so anyway, using the pattern that we have for this bag, though, you could also just make the bag completely out of leather. There's one right there. It's all the same type of leather, handles, body, bottom, all of it, except for the little patch that I sewed on with my maker's stamp on it. So yeah, it's two completely different bags, but they're actually exactly the same. They're just made out of different materials. So yeah, it's a really neat project either way. One of the reasons I love using canvas is the just the difference. Yeah, it's fun to work with something else once in a while, but also it's more economical for sure. Leather's very expensive, as we all know, and while canvas isn't cheap, it's definitely cheaper than leather. So we're going to start offering canvas. We have a huge order in for about 6 or 7 different colors of this heavy canvas here, and we're going to start carrying it because we're going to make a lot more projects like this in the future. Um, yeah. So in the mystery box this month, we did the big introduction for all this stuff, and we included a pattern for that bag. We will have these patterns for sale very, very soon. Um, but there it is. There's a piece for the main body. There's a piece for the bottom. It's got handle placements and stuff, and then it's got some instructions on it. But that's what this video is, the real instructions for this thing. Before I started the video, I went ahead and cut out my pieces because there's not a reason to sit there and watch me cut out some rectangles. I these handles here were pre-cut, but I haven't done anything to the edges. They're just 1-inch straps. Handle length on a bag like this is always a big variable because some people would want to just carry it, around with just their hands. Some people would want it long enough to put it over their shoulder or carry it with their hands, and then some people would want, say, a hand carry with an optional shoulder strap. We'll get into that in a later video as we make some different styles of bags. Excuse me, I was sick a couple of weeks ago and I still hadn't quit coughing. All right. If you get one of our paper patterns and you want to turn it into more of a template type thing, what I tell people to do is glue this whole thing down to a nice piece of cardboard or poster board or something like that. Glue the entire paper pattern down and then cut out your pieces. You can use that 3M spray adhesive that we've used on a lot of projects. But yeah, that's how you can turn this one. We will make this into a template, but it's most likely just going to be available in the store and when we go to shows and stuff like that because it's not going to be a very shipping friendly template. And the post office works very hard to break every template we put in the mail. Not all of them, but anyway, you get the point. So without further ado, let's make a bag. Again, I already cut out my pieces here. All right. So what I need to do is I need to make my straps an even length with each other and then kind of round off the ends or have a pointed end on them. So I'm just going to reach across here and grab me a round end punch. I'm going to set it right there on both of these straps and I'm going to give it a whack. All right, and then I will go to the other end and do the exact same thing. Two straps, exact same length, rounded ends. Except for that strap is messed up. No wonder it was in the boneyard pile. Let me get another one right quick, I'm sorry. It's funny, sometimes there's a reason I scrap something and then I reach into the scrap pile and get it and must have forgotten that reason. One more again. On this video, I will be using a Class 18 sewing machine from Leather Machine Company. It's a really nice light to medium weight sewing machine, and it is absolutely perfect for this project. You can easily use other sewing machines, but that's just the one that I choose to use on this one. All right, let's try that again. So now we have our handles. All right, so we'll set the handles to the side, and we're going to do some prep work on the bag body, the main piece of canvas. On this pattern, the canvas is one solid piece, goes all the way down throughout the bag. Even where the leather bottom is, it's still got canvas. Okay? Now, if you're making this out of leather, you can actually make it into 3 sections. That way you don't need one gigantic piece of leather plus a cap on the bottom of it. You can cut a front, you can cut a back, and you can put the bottom cap on. Sorry, I don't want my pipe to go to waste. So anyway, the first thing we need to do is we need to roll this top edge of this bag. We're going to do that because canvas is very, very prone to fraying. The fibers are very heavy in it. The threads that are woven in are very thick, and when it starts fraying, like gigantic, huge threads coming off. So we're going to take our 1/4 inch double-sided sticky tape. As soon as I line the end of it here, where's the end? And we're going to put it right along this top edge of the canvas. Okay, so on one of the short ends of this big long piece of canvas is where we put that. All right. Then I'll pull the end of it off, and we're going to fold it over. Or sorry, pull the paper off the back of the tape, and we'll fold it over here. And I'm just trying to fold over, you know, 1/4 inch, a little bit more, whatever. I just want it to be even all the way across, though. I don't want this to end up being a lopsided bag because of this fold. Now, if you're making this out of leather, you'll want to skive this and then roll it over. And you'll only need to roll it over once, as opposed to on this canvas, we're going to roll it over twice to totally hide that that edge, that fraying edge. All right, so I folded it over. I'm gonna get my squeaky toy out, and I'm gonna roll it down nice and tight, get a good crease there, and then we're gonna do it again. Again, we're doing all this just to completely hide that frayed edge. It makes a really nice rolled edge on it. It'll have a very professional look to it if you do this. Get my squeaky toy out, roll that one down again. Now, I'm going to pause the camera and I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other end of this, this piece of canvas here. Alrighty. All right, I readjusted the camera angle because how it was focused on me, you couldn't actually even tell there was canvas laying on the table, and I apologize for that. I spent a lot of money last month and actually got us a new camera that we can make better videos and everything. But the problem is it zooms in too much, and this is a very, very large project in comparison to what's normally sitting on my little workbench. So that's why we're still using the old camera. All right, so now that I have done the rolled edges on this, let me get them up there. Those rolled edges are right there on this. I am going to, I've got to find the center of this piece of canvas. All right. So I have a gigantic centering ruler to make it easy. This is made by C.S. Osborne. It's a great ruler. So I've got my giant ruler, and I should have a marker somewhere. There's a pen, a pencil. That's good enough. All right, so I need to find the center of this piece of canvas. And I'm going to make a little mark there. And it's okay to make that mark because it's not going to show in the final product. So all right, we'll get this thing out of the way. And then my piece of leather for the bottom cap, I'm going to find the centers on it too. I'm just going to mark them since this is pull-up leather. It's very easy to mark. All right, and then, what the hell am I doing? I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. Trying to go too fast here. I need to find the centers this direction. This is when editing really, really works because I sure would hate for that to show up on this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up those centers and I'm going to stick this sucker onto this piece of canvas. So I've got some wider double stick tape here. I'm going to put it on. This oil tan, the double stick tape can be a challenge to stick down. You got to be pretty gentle when you're pulling against it. Because it's, oil tan is made to naturally be able to resist things like adhesive or dirt or water or whatever. So, yeah. So it can be hard to pull the paper off without just pulling your tape right back up. But we just need a temporary hold while we go to the sewing machine and sew it down. If you don't have this double-sided tape, you can use the 3M spray adhesive. You could lightly use some contact cement, but I wouldn't use so much that it would go through the canvas, of course. All right, so I'm going to line up my centers, and I'm just going to drop this sucker down. Excuse me. Use my squeaky toy, push that down real good. right. Somebody actually suggested that, you could always oil that thing and then it wouldn't be a squeaky toy anymore, but then I'd have to change the name of it. So I might have to use something more official than squeaky toy. All right, I'm going to pause this video because I'm going to change the angle of the camera and we're going to point it over there at my sewing machine. And we're going to sew down these two sides right here. Now, this bag, if you can tell, has 2 stitch lines down there. That is not necessary, but man, it sure looks cool. So I'm probably just going to do one on this one, but it is a neat little option. And speaking of options, this is a very, very basic bag, very basic. And you can modify it a million ways from Sunday. You can add a pocket, you can add an interior, you can do all kinds of stuff. You can make the handles longer, you can, like I said, make it out of different kinds of leathers, different colors, whatever. You can modify this bag a million ways and it'll look like a million different bags, even though it's all basically the same thing. So, I'm going to pause it. We'll go get over there and get to sewing. All right, so here we are over at the sewing machine. Ordinarily, I would have a light on the sewing machine, but it creates quite the glare for the camera, and it's going to be harder to see what I'm doing. So I'll just have to do this in the blind. Now, again, you can sew this by hand. It's not impossible at all. It does take a lot more time, but it's not difficult, even a little bit. Straight line sewing. But if you're using a sewing machine, it's real simple to do these lines, and you don't have to backstitch here. You don't have to worry about locking your stitch in and stuff because all of this is going to be inside the final seam of the bag side. So I'm just going to sew straight on down this thing. Again, this is a class 18 sewing machine from Leather Machine Company. Great little machine for things like this. All right, let me drop my edge guide down here a little bit. I can sew a straight line pretty good, but I can sew a lot faster if it's going along this edge guide. Here we go. Now, I will tell you this, off camera, I did check my bobbin to make sure that it was full. That is always the first rule of sewing on a machine is check that bobbin and make sure you're not going to get 6 stitches in and run out of bobbin thread. All right, so there's 1 stitch line. We'll snip that, and we'll sew the other one, and then we're going to go, and those edges that we rolled earlier, we're going to go ahead and sew those down too, because they need to be. Excuse me. I'm using just the natural colored thread. It kind of blends in with the canvas. I really think red thread would be an awesome color for this project. I just hadn't dug out my red spool of thread and put it on the machine to do one. I don't know, the red probably just would look really nice with this canvas and with this brown. All right. Somebody's messed with my presser foot tension because this is the first time it's marked up a bag like this. That's what stinks when you run a store, though, and people come in and demo your sewing machines, is sometimes they're not left on the same adjustments that you left them on. That's okay. I know a guy that can adjust it. Got Blink 182 on the radio today. That always makes me happy. Tried to turn it down enough that it doesn't get onto the video too much. But if it does, whatever. All right. One side done. Now the other side, we'll sew this line, and then we're going to talk about handle placement. Bad nipper. I'm going to get the better one if they cut much more nicely. All right, I'm going to pause the video again, and we'll go over there and place our handles. Then we'll come back over here and do some more stitching. All right, so came back over here, grabbed, this is a big fabric thing. I got a Hobby Lobby. It's a great measuring device for larger stuff. But here I'm just going to use it in a very simple manner. I'm buttoning it up against the bottom, and then I'm putting my centering ruler up against it, and then I'll put my handles right there. And that way I'll know that the handles are at an even height, and I won't have one up here and one down there and, you know, stuff like that. So I'm going to let half of this bag fall off the table here so that I can read my centering ruler. And handle placement is entirely up to you. I'm going to place these about 6 inches apart, centered left to right on the bag. Okay, and it'll be just like that right there. So I need to get me some double-sided tape and place on the back of them. Excuse me. Now, you can sew your handles, you can rivet your handles, you can do all kinds of stuff. I am going to sew these, but if you rivet them and you're using canvas, I warn you that you might want to put a piece of leather on the inside of the bag to have something really solid to rivet them to and not just the fabric. Hope that makes sense. You do want to make sure when you put your handles down that they don't have a twist in them. If you do, because then you sew them in, you're done. Throw it away, start again. So, yeah. On this bag, I'm trying something new, by the way. This folded over lip, I'm leaving it on the outside of the bag. My previous bags, I left it on the inside, and I just thought maybe it'd be a different look to maybe leave it on the outside. We'll see how that works out for me. It may bite me. I don't know. All right. Check my centering ruler. Make sure it's in the middle here. We've had a lot of good reviews on our centering rulers. I know I really like them. I gave one to my mom some time ago, and she's a quilter when she has time. And anyway, she called me back a couple of months later, and was like, "Oh my gosh, I just used that for the first time, and it's amazing." So I may be 40 years old, but I still like to impress my mom. All right, so there they are. There's the handle for one side. I'll go ahead and stick on the handle for the other side, and then we'll sew these down. Actually, I say that. First thing I'm going to do is mark the tops of my sew lines so that they're nice and even. And again, I don't sew one of them all the way up here while the other one's just sewn down to here. So, yeah. Let me find something kind of sharp to mark that with. I'm using a scalpel, but please keep in mind, I'm just using the back side of the blade and lightly marking that leather. I'm not cutting it. I'm just making a little mark so that I'll know where to stop sewing when I sew around it. All right, so we'll spin this bag around. We'll do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll come back to the sewing machine. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this so that you don't have to watch me do it twice. All right, here we are, back at the sewing machine. Phone's already ringing off the hook for the morning, so I got to get going on this video here. So this part can be a little bit more difficult to pass around the sewing machine, but it's nothing unmanageable by any means. I have my little marks where I wanted the top of my sew lines to be here. So when I start sewing, I'm going to start right in that area. As soon as I can grab my thread. And I'm just going to slowly go down, around, back up to that mark, across that mark, and then lock in my stitches by going over the first couple again. So I want the corner of that stitch to be right on that line. I'll do one of these on camera, and then we'll pause it again while I do the other three, because I go pretty slow on this just to make sure that my stitches are nice and even. And sewing machine tip: if you're going around a curve, you always want to do your turning of your item while the needle is down. Okay, you want the needle to go all the way down, come back up just a tiny bit so that the shuttle hook can grab that top thread. And then you rotate your leather to where the next needle hole needs to be. Okay. And just like that. That's why, like I said, I go pretty slow, but I do make sure that my stitches are nice and even going around a curve. If you don't do this, then you'll have short stitches, you'll have long stitches, you'll have out of place stitches, or you could even have skip stitches where there's a hole there, but the stitch didn't run. And then also, you know, if you've got a nice round piece of leather, you don't want to have like a pointed stitch. You know, you want it to you want the stitch to follow the curve really nicely and not have a place where it turns really sharply or anything like that. All right. I'm going to go back up to my mark. And if I have to, which I do, I'm going to kind of manually place it back on that marked line. So we'll run across the marked line back to the original stitch and then go over, sorry, this is all in the way here. And then we'll go over those first 2 or 3 stitches to lock it all in place. Again, I'm going to manually place it into that hole since it didn't perfectly line up on its own. Turn the material. There we go. One side of one handle is sewn onto the bag. And again, I'm going to pause the video while I sew the other 3 sides of these handles. And when I come back, we will talk about final assembly. This bag goes together very quickly if you're using a sewing machine. And I'll reiterate one more time, if you don't own a sewing machine, it doesn't mean you can't make this. It just means it's going to take you a little longer. So, one more time, pausing the camera. All right, my handles are now sewn on, so they are now a permanent part of the bag. Now we're going to do our final construction. All right, which basically means we need to put these two ends together and get it folded up inside out. All right. And when we do this, we want to make sure that not only the tops match up, but also where the leather is matches up. Okay, you might have to do a little bit of stretching and fudging to make sure that that happens, but you want these the two ends of this leather down here to match up and this top part right here to match up. So as you can see, mine's a little bit off, but once I've got it all put together and everything, it won't be off. I'll make sure and sew it to where it's nice and squared. If you don't, then what you risk is when you turn your bag right side out, this bottom portion, when you look at the side of the bag, this bottom portion will just not look right because the leather won't be the same on both sides of the seam. And that's not good. Now, on this bag that I showed earlier, if you look on the inside, I actually took some leather and wrapped around that seam before I sewed it down. And again, that's to keep the fraying edges of the leather from showing. It just makes a more professional look. And you can take any piece of scrap leather or even scrap canvas and fold over that and do that. I've even seen some people take and just take the whole thing and fold it over itself like that. But we would have had to account for that when we put this leather in the bottom if we were going to do it that way. So anyway, I'm going to grab me some scrap leather right quick, and I'll wrap it around that. And what I'll do is I use lots of these little binder clips here. These little simple clips. I don't tape that down because when I turn it right side out, I don't want the tape to accidentally show in that seam. So I just use lots of these little binder clips to hold my bag together while I sew it. So I'm going to go find me a piece of scrap leather that is pretty thin that I can wrap around that. And I'm only going to do the leather part down to where the bottom leather is. Otherwise, it gets really thick down there. It's going to be a lot harder to sew. So I'm going to pause this one more time here. All right, so I got me some really thin pieces of leather. They're just like 1, maybe 2 ounce. I mean, it's just some scrap. Cut it into about a 1-inch wide strip. And I'm going to go ahead and hold the bottom of this bag together with a binder clip so that I can wrap that leather around and stick it on and hold it together with my binder clips. A real thin piece is a lot easier to use than a thicker piece. And I'm just trying to make it to where it's kind of even on both sides. That way when I'm sewing, I get through both sides of the leather. Plus, of course, you need to make sure you're sewing through the canvas and not have the leather coming off of it accidentally. Clip it down. Once I've got this side clipped down, I'll do the exact same thing to the other side, and then it's broke. And then I'll readjust the cameras and stuff, and we'll be back at the sewing machine for a few minutes, doing our final sewing on this thing. And all in all, this bag can be made in about an hour. If you're using a sewing machine. If you're not using a sewing machine, I'll stress again, it's not hard to make the bag, it just takes longer. So, again, I got to make sure that my leather pieces at the bottom sandwich up real nice because that will make sure that the seam is real pretty once it's all put together there. If I can figure out how to use my dadgum clips here. There we go. And then I'll make sure that my top pieces match up, and then I'll put that leather on there. If you're making this bag out of leather, you don't really have to do this step because you don't have the fraying edges that you have to worry about. If you're just making it out of solid leather, not using canvas. All right. All right, I've got it clipped down, so now I'm gonna go back over to the sewing machine and we'll stitch this bag up real quick. One more pause for a camera move. All right, back at the machine here. What I'm gonna do is I'll start at the bottom of the bag here and work my way up to the top. I'm gonna sew in about 3/8 of an inch or so, just to make sure that I've got a real good sturdy seam on the side of this bag. At the bottom of the bag, I don't need to lock my stitch in. Reason being is because that actually is going to be part of another seam here in a minute. So here we go. I know my hand's kind of in the way, but I do have to hold this right up against that edge guide pretty good. And then as I get to my clips, I just take them off. Like that one right there. Right at the last second, I move my fingers. Because nobody likes to sew their fingers to their project. Waited a little long. Clip got stuck in there. Just a second here. All right. Get my edge guide back in place. Okay. I am going a little bit slower on the seam because I do want to make sure I get it just right. My last clip. Make sure my tops are still nice and aligned. You can still fudge it just a little bit because fabric will pull and stretch a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop this right before it hits that top rollover place because I'm going to put a rivet in there when this is all said and done. So I've stopped it. I'm doing my lock stitching, and I'm going to, at the very end, I'll put a rivet in up there, and that'll really support the top of the bag and make dang sure that it's nice and sturdy. All right, move it over, fold it over, and do the other side here. And pause the video while I sew this side up, and then I'll show you how to do the box corner. All right, so this bag is really coming together, and it's getting to the exciting parts of being able to finish it. But we have to do our box corner so that the bottom of the bag is flat. Otherwise, you just have a giant envelope. So what we're going to do is you have to kind of reach in the bag here to help spread it out. And you want to flatten that dog ear corner. Let me pause this right quick. The mail lady's here. All right, got the mail out the door for the day. So what we were doing is crushing this corner and creating this little dog ear here. Okay, and basically you're going to try to figure out how wide do you want your bag. This bag's going to be just under 4 inches wide. So what you do is, if let's say we wanted it 4 inches wide, then what we need to do is mark a line across here that's 2 inches from the corner. And then you'll get a bag that's about 4 inches wide. I don't want it quite 4 inches wide, so I'm gonna back it off to, I don't know, 1.5 inches. And then you need to make sure too that when you crush this, that the seam is just running perfectly in between that angle. If it's off to the left or off to the right, your problem is going to be that your bag's going to be lopsided and it won't be even and it won't sit straight and flat. So yeah, I'm just going to take a pencil here and draw a line across there, and that's going to be my sew line for that. All right, and then I'll come over here and do the exact same thing on the other side. You can make your bag as wide as you want, but you also keep in mind that, you know, the leather coming up on the sides is affected by that too. You know, so if you were going for a certain amount of leather up on the sides of your bag, then you got to take that into account. All right. Oop, I'm sorry, this is not able to be seen very well. I apologize for that. I don't always look at the monitor. So I'm just drawing this line straight across there. And that's where I'm going to sew, is right there on that penciled line. Unfortunately, with the camera angle, it's going to be difficult to see. If not, just straight up impossible. But all I'm doing is sewing that line straight across. I do need to lock the stitch in because this is the very last sewing that we're going to do on this bag. So I'm going to go backwards and then I'll go forward. Now, there's this big seam here, this big hump for the machine to get over. This is definitely a place where hand sewing would have a benefit because you don't have to worry about stuff like that. You just keep on sewing. But with the machine, I have to kind of walk it across that hump because it's pretty big. I mean, it's pretty much maxing out the Class 18 here. All right, so there's one corner sewn. We'll go back over to the other side and do the other corner. And then we're gonna set some rivets really quick in the tops. And yeah, we'll be ready to turn this thing right side out and see how we did. It's kind of like the moment of truth. All right, let me cut some of these strings off so we can get a better picture of what we're looking at here. So these are now sewn down. You can see the line there and there on both ends. There it is. So yeah, I'm gonna turn the camera back around, and all the rest of the work is gonna be done over there at the table. We'll set a couple of rivets, and we're gonna turn this thing right side out. See how it looks. All right, so got me a little hole punch here. I've got a couple of very small, they're just double cap rivets is all they are. I really like Jiffy rivets. They're kind of expensive, but man, they sure are nice. So I'm gonna take my hole punch. I need to make sure it's far enough in that it gets both pieces of canvas plus both pieces of leather. Drive my punch through there. And we will set us a rivet. It's about the max for this tiny little rivet. I almost put a copper rivet in it, but I didn't want to go find my copper rivet cutters. All right, so we'll set that one. Move over here and do the exact same thing on the other side. Line up. Of course, the very last step I'm doing has to play hard to get here. Story of all projects, I reckon. There we go. Got it started. Set. All right. If I don't put all these back in their pouch, I'll lose them, guaranteed. So we're gonna take and cut these little dog ears off the bottom, the corners. Just got a massive pair of scissors here. I'm gonna work it slow so I don't break my scissors because it's a lot of material. And I'm just cutting it about 1/4 of an inch from the that sew line that we did in the corner. That's why I was saying we don't have to backstitch that very bottom part. That's because that gets cut off anyway. All right, so the moment of truth. We now get to turn our bag right side out. It's a fun and slow process. Sometimes I don't even know where to start. So let's just do it. Pull the leather bottom through first, and then I'll work on the corners after I get it through. Just a second. Somebody knocking on the door. All right, so let's go back to turning this thing right side out. FedEx man came and brought me a big box of goodies. Okay, push the bottom through there. And we'll work on turning the corners here. To turn the corners, I'm just gonna push real hard, just right there in the actual corner itself. And there we go. The cool thing about this pull-up leather is it's gonna change colors on you as you do all this. It makes it pretty neat. Because I mean, look how nice and distressed that is now compared to what it was before. So, like I said, you want those two pieces of leather to really line up on that seam. It doesn't quite look right if they don't. So it just helps the overall appearance and professionalism of your bag if they do. And here's where a mistake was made. I'm gonna have to re-rivet this area right here because that rivet didn't catch that. So I'll do that off camera because, well, it may take me a few minutes to drill that one out and everything else. Anyway, but other than that, there is our damn near perfect bag. Again, you can use this as a base model to create any bag you want, really. The modifications and possibilities are endless. But you know, have fun with it, and make sure to send us pictures of your creations, and we'll see what you did with them. Just in time for the phone to ring. You all have a great day. I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and we'll see you next time.